This is the Journey Podcast Edition. If what you're building didn't come with a playbook, you're in the right place.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Journey Podcast Edition, where we dig into the strategies, systems, and smarts that help builders thrive. I'm your host, Paul, and today we're going to be talking about something that every builder thinks they're doing, but very few are doing well: customer feedback. Specifically, how to design better surveys and feedback loops that generate real insight, not just vanity metrics or a pile of unstructured noise. And I talked a little bit about this the other week with the scalable feedback engine. In this episode, we're going to talk more about the art and science of actually asking the questions. And we'll get into something that I call the innovation heartbeat a little bit later on, which is a system for actually making sure that the insights you collect through surveying get out through to the wider organization. So, customer feedback. If you've ever launched something, anything, you've probably asked for feedback. You might have sent a survey link, you might have run a focus group, you might have just asked your friends, your family, what they thought about what you're doing. And maybe you got some nice words back, or maybe you got nothing. It happens. People are busy, right? The truth, asking for feedback isn't the same as getting insight, especially in those cases where you're asking people that you know really well. Maybe they want to be nice to you and don't have the heart to give it to you straight. You know, that feedback's kind of limited value. So let's dig into how to design feedback mechanisms that have purpose, they're actionable, and they're sustainable over time, not just as like a one-off, but as a system that's repeatable. Why feedback fails? Let's start there. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Most feedback efforts, they fail. And that doesn't mean that they fail loudly, like they implode and everybody knows. Sometimes they fail because the wheel just doesn't keep on turning. Inertia isn't there, and things just kind of peter out, they disappear. Why does this happen? Because they're built without purpose, really. Feedback loops that fail tend to be built reactively, or worse, they're built in kind of a generic way. Here's what I mean. Someone puts together, say like a 10-question survey, they send it out to their entire mailing list, and they hope that something insightful floats to the top. But those questions, they weren't specific. And if you don't do that, and if your method of, putting together the survey and targeting people to ask those questions to isn't thoughtful, you're just collecting data, not insight, not direction, just noise. So what's the fix for that? Well, I've always found that anchoring everything that you do when you're doing customer research to purpose makes things kind of row and flow and go in the right direction. It kind of makes it all make sense. Purpose is the anchor that keeps your feedback mechanism from drifting. But not just one kind of purpose. You need to consider 3 different kinds of purpose. And this is really why I love the word purpose in an organizational setting, because it's scalable. So you've got organizational purpose. This applies to the entire org, the entire company. Why does your business exist? What problem are you solving? Then you've also got team level purpose. This can also be, business unit, department, whatever, just a grouping of people that work together. And purpose there can be, what does each functional group need to know in order to succeed? So what's the purpose of the team? What's the purpose of the department? Who are they in service to? And then there's individual purpose. What do you as the builder or the investigator want to improve or to explore? What are you in service to? What's your purpose within that bigger setting of the team or the organization? These 3 layers, they're interrelated, right? Like personal purpose feeds into team level purpose, which feeds into organizational purpose. When you're designing like your surveys and your questions and everything else, you end up asking better questions. They're more aligned to the purpose of who your stakeholder is. They're more insightful, and they're more likely to generate action and results and data that you can distill into insights, which in turn drive innovation. So here's a few examples to kind of illustrate that point, and these are in context. So example one, let's pretend that you are the leader of a team of delivery drivers. You're like a shift supervisor, team lead, what have you. Your goal isn't just to get packages from A to B. I mean, obviously you've got to do that, right? But your purpose as the leader is to make sure that the delivery experience delights the customer, that they've got a great experience with that delivery. So instead of sending out a generic satisfaction survey to your email list, you maybe embed a QR code on the packing slip that links to a short survey about the delivery. So someone can scan it with their phone, maybe it's 5-6 questions, and you ask about that delivery experience. So you get that firsthand knowledge from the person who received the package. You could ask things like, was it on time? Was the driver polite? Did you, as the customer, the recipient of the package, did you feel informed throughout? This is feedback kind of tied to a moment. It's contextual. It's relevant. It's actionable. You can build a baseline off of these and track how things are going over time. Another example, let's say, you're a product designer. You're designing furniture. That's kind of what you do. And in this case, you're designing a kitchen countertop unit. One of those things that you kind of put on your kitchen island and you chop up veggies with it, whatever it is. You want it to be the best tomato dicing station ever. That's your goal. That's your purpose in this context. So what do? Well, you don't send out a survey to your entire mailing list, again, asking, describe your dream kitchen and what you would do within it. It's pretty vague. That's hard to answer, right? I would instead hit the streets, go out to, the sidewalk, a mall, some public space, and talk to people. Ask 25 different people, what do you love about your current countertop? What do you hate about it? What do you wish that it did that it doesn't currently do? Now you're kind of collecting language, you're collecting patterns, you're getting to pain points, game points. All of these things can help you build something that people actually want. So, you can take this feedback and you can use it to inform your design and prototyping process if you're that product designer, right? Industrial designer by trade. Here's another use case. You're a sales leader. Your purpose is to align what you sell, what your team is selling, with what your customers value. So you're not changing the product really. You're just making sure that what the product is, the pain points that it addresses, lines up with how your team is communicating that. The natural inclination for a lot of sales leaders is to kind of default to NPS stuff, like how likely would you be to recommend us? And put that in the survey, put that in the signature of your email, linking to that NPS survey or whatever. That's not going to give you a whole lot of useful, actionable stuff, right? So instead, you could email your 10 longest standing customers and your 10 newest customers and ask them, hey, what problems did we solve for you? What benefits have you seen? And what almost made you not choose us when you were thinking about what you were going to do to solve this problem? This feedback can help you rewrite your pitch deck and your sales collateral and your funnels and how your team is messaging. It can give them more ammo to work with when they're out, especially if you're finding that lately things haven't really been clicking. So what else? Well, when you're creating a survey, when you're building one of these feedback loops, focus is your friend. And this is where most builders kind of slip up. They try to ask everything in one survey. They think, well, let's just throw in, 15 questions and see what comes back, 20 questions. We'll make it like a longer survey. We'll only do it twice a year. It's all good. Let's just throw something out there and see what we get back. Sound familiar? I mean, I'll be completely honest. I've done this before uh, years ago, and I kind of learned like a lesson from it when engagement was really awful. So here's the problem with that, though. Your customers, your paying customers, they don't owe you any cognitive effort. They don't owe you feedback. They really don't. So like the people who are going to help you with feedback, they're already kind of doing something that they don't have to do. They're already doing you a favor. Don't make it harder for them. If your survey feels broad, generic, kind of aimless, doesn't really have a point, they're going to check out after maybe like the first question or two. And, depending on your survey platform, either you'll get a partial completion, which doesn't really help you, or you won't get any data at all. If your survey requires it to be, your platform requires it to be like completely done before any information, any data is recorded. So you could kind of miss out even on that couple of questions, right? Here's a better approach. Create targeted surveys tied to specific stakeholder and purpose combinations. Each one's simple, focused, relevant, short. And then choose a touch point that makes sense. Don't send all of the surveys that you create to absolutely everybody. Maybe you have one survey that, like we talked about with the delivery driver, is just on the packing slip or the invoice that goes out in shipments. Maybe you have another touch point that is a part of your inbound contact process for a customer support team or something. Maybe you have another touch point that's in your email signature. Maybe you have another touch point that's on your website. All of this stuff should be tailored and kept kind of small and kept kind of on point. And that's really how you move from passive data collection towards something that helps you generate insights more actively and with more thought and more purpose. And let's be clear about insight generation. Like what you get back from your surveys, the data aggregation, those aren't insights. Insights are what you do with that. So insights really require a person to distill them into something actionable that your organization can use. Like, don't confuse the two. Don't confuse the completion of the survey with the generation of insights. They're not the same thing. Just kind of like an asterisk on sending out surveys and whatnot. You need to motivate people. So let's talk about incentivizing your respondents the right way. Your biggest fans, they're going to respond to your survey because they love what you do and they genuinely want to help you. And if you have people like that kind of in your orbit, customers like that, be very grateful because it's kind of rare. Not every brand, not every organization has that level of love for what you do. The thing about that is, though, your biggest fans, it's going to kind of be a small sample compared to your overall, and potentially it's going to be biased because these people love what you do, so they may not be as constructive or critical as kind of neutral customers would be. And the constructive and critical stuff is where a lot of really valuable feedback lives that you can turn into actionable insights. So kind of the question in front of us is, how do you get the quiet middle to participate? And the answer is, it's incentives. And it doesn't mean that you have to give out like $10 gift cards or anything. You don't have to all of a sudden go to your CFO or, the money person, or if you're, an entrepreneur kind of running your own business, you don't have to look at your bank account and start sweating about how much money you can put into, for gift cards or coffee cards or whatever. You can get creative with these incentives. They don't have to be cash incentives, even though that's what a lot of brands do. For example, like if you're a game developer, why don't you offer exclusive in-game content or skins or something for people who respond to a specific survey? Like the incremental cost of that is nothing. It's a little bit of time, right? If you're a coffee shop, offer a free week of drip coffee if they complete the survey. And could be a bonus there where you, when they come into the store to claim their free coffee every day during the given week, you put like a new brand or a new like blend or roast or whatever in front of them and ask them for feedback again, kind of a 2-for-1 deal, right? If you're an e-commerce brand, reward them with points in your loyalty program. Like you've got one of those, right? If not, you should. They're super useful, especially for stuff like this. So my point is that incentives, they don't have to be expensive. They just need to feel valuable to the person who is receiving that invitation to participate in your feedback process. If you've already convinced someone to trade money for your product, you can probably convince them to trade a little bit more of their time for a little bit extra value that extends that product or service experience, right? Okay, let's talk about the innovation heartbeat, what it is, how to establish it. So taking this a layer deeper, because even the most thoughtful survey process, it can kind of die on the vine if the data that you collect and the insights you generate don't actually lead to anything. Kind of becomes like a futile exercise, and we don't want that. When that happens, and this is probably going to feel like familiar for some people, I've certainly seen it with organizations. Kind of here's what happens. You collect feedback, and that's like a person or a small team doing it. They generate a report. They kind of like share the report out into Slack or Teams or email or whatever else, like the once, and then they move on to the next thing. And nothing changes because of that work in that report. Like the accountability chain kind of breaks there. And pretty soon people stop bothering with customer insights and research in the first place because like there's that weak point when someone hands off a report to someone else. So a method to fix this problem that I found pretty powerful when I used it is the innovation heartbeat. It's kind of a simple concept that as soon as we start talking about this, I start talking about this a little bit more, you're probably going to think, well, duh, obviously. But you'd be shocked at how infrequently this happens. The innovation heartbeat is a powerful rhythm, just like the beating of a heart. You've got an input pulse. So you're collecting feedback at routine intervals. That's your heart expanding and pulling in like the blood into the heart. And then you've got the output pulse. And that's where you're sharing these distilled insights with relevant teams regularly, and you're talking about them. And that's kind of like the heart contracting and like shooting the blood through your arteries and veins to the rest of your body. So your body is functioning optimally. This really is like this customer research stuff with the innovation heartbeat. It really is like a living system. And the great thing about this is that, you can do it with different sized teams. When you build consistency into your routine, as like, a team or a founder or whatever else, this starts to become second nature. And over time, that encourages innovation because you're always talking about new stuff that comes from the customer sphere, that comes from the market. If you're a 3-person team, block off time once a month to review the feedback together and talk about stuff. If you're a 300-person, company, do the same thing, but segment it out through team-level pulses tied to department goals. This doesn't have to be a huge ordeal or anything. Just make it a habit. And over time, when it becomes second nature, good things will really start to happen. You'll see some accountability. You'll see change. You'll see positive momentum. My point with really the innovation heartbeat is that feedback's not a one-time project. It's not something that you can do once a year, twice a year, and forget about it. It's got to be a loop. It's got to be consistent, got to be continuous, and you have to actually talk about the ideas that come from it. When you build feedback into your organization's operational DNA, you stop treating innovation as like a blue sky brainstorm, Hail Mary, once in a million lucky streak, and you start treating innovation like it's a supply chain, which is what it really is. There's a supply chain behind innovation that has to be fostered, nurtured, and like the wheels, they got to be greased. It's got to run. Your customers are providing the raw materials, which is the data, answers to your questions. Your team assembles the ideas, or the owner, the champion of this program. And I really advocate for like one person to be the champion of all this. They assemble the ideas, and then you cycle that into your product or service delivery pipeline, and you start shipping things that are improved over time. And that doesn't always mean product, right? Like it can mean how you're communicating. What are you doing from a marketing standpoint? What's your PR like? What's all this other stuff like that's in service of the customer? You get a better idea of how to do that in a more effective way, and you're improving. And really, that's how you also avoid stagnation, right? Because there's always fresh stuff coming in to think about and to work on and consider. Innovation over long terms, over like arcs of years, is probably your best way, the best mechanism that you have, the best thing in your toolkit to avoid becoming a commodity and stay relevant. As soon as you start to become a commodity, you enter that vicious race to the bottom, kind of like price floor cycle that kills a lot of really promising companies. So just to recap, don't ask generic questions. Anchor your feedback, your questions to real purpose. Whether it's at the individual level, think about who your stakeholder is. Who are you creating this survey for? And what's their purpose? Don't collect feedback randomly. Match it to relevant touch points. Make sure that a sales thing is tied to sales touch points. Product thing is tied to product touch points. Delivery thing is tied to delivery touch points, etc., etc. Don't rely on goodwill alone. Offer value in exchange for people taking the time to answer your survey. Don't just collect feedback. Build a rhythm to act on it. Talk about it internally. Make it a habit. Because in the end, customer insight is not really just a nice to have. It's your unfair competitive advantage. So many companies don't do this. If you do this, it gives you a serious edge. I can't emphasize that enough. Plus, when you get it right, when you build feedback habits that scale, you kind of really unlock that North Star that every builder is chasing. Clarity, direction, momentum.
And that's it for this episode of the Journey Podcast Edition. If you're building something from scratch or scaling something messy, make sure to follow, share, or just send this to someone else in the trenches. Until next time, keep climbing.